Hi there, and welcome to Herd Online number two, where we look at Alexey Guzey's new essay on sleep. And I want to say right away that if you're struggling with sleep at this point, then this is probably not a video that will be very helpful for you. But if you have kind of a general interest in what's happening in like the sleep world, and particularly if you wondered like why is it that we always hear that we should sleep 7 to 9 hours, that is natural. And why, if you wonder why it is that there's this seems to be like really the consensus belief out there among policy experts and like scientists, then I think there's a lot here that you can learn from. We'll see that there's really no basis for any number, like suggesting sleeping any particular number, and we'll see why this consensus belief exists among like policymakers and other people that have an interest here. But First of all, I want to say that Alexey Guzey has been a guest here before, actually, or he has been a guest here, I should say, talking Somna 53. And, Alexey's claim to fame in the sleep world is that he did something that I think was really brave and really, really important. He examined the first chapter of Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, and found that it was actually riddled with errors, fabrications of data, fabrication of charts. Um, very, very problematic, and he's really debunked the book. Unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot of people don't know about this. A lot of people still think that it's that Matthew Walker's book is credible and things like that. But what can you do? Alexei is still a hero in my opinion, and I got an email from him. He had written a thesis on sleep. I thought that was interesting, something for us to review on a Heard Online episode. So let's jump in and take a look and see what Alexey has written. I'm going to share my screen here, and here it is. This is Alexey's thesis, and I just read through it, so I knew what I would like to share with you. We'll sort of skim through the whole thing, but there's some things I thought were more interesting than others. So let's read the summary. Alexey says in this, and Alexey, by the way, he's a scientist researcher. He has a non-for-profit. He is originally from Russia, but he was exiled from Russia last time I spoke to him, and he was granted political asylum in the United States, and he's a real truth seeker. So he is, he's someone you can easily see that authorities have a problem with, and I do believe that applies to sleep authorities too. So I think of him often, only half jokingly, as the most dangerous man in sleep. So anyway, a little bit more about Alexey there. Let's read his summary. In this essay, I question some of the consensus beliefs about sleep, such as the need for at least 7 hours of sleep for adults, harmfulness of the acute sleep deprivation, and harmfulness of long-term sleep deprivation, and our inability to adapt to it. He's questioning all these things. And he says, it appears that the evidence for all these beliefs is much weaker than sleep scientists and public health experts want us to believe. In particular, I conclude that it's plausible that at least acute sleep deprivation is not only harmful, but beneficial in some contexts, and that is that we are able to adapt to long-term sleep deprivation. And he also said, I also discussed the bidirectional relationship of sleep and mania depression and the costs of unnecessary sleep, noting that sleeping 1.5 hours per day less, resulting in gaining more than a month of wakefulness per year every year. A little typical of him, I think, a little kind of controversial opinion there that, hey, if you sleep more than you need, you're missing out on wakefulness, on doing things that you enjoy in life, And I know for a lot of people, and this is not applicable to most people that are in our community where, there's a struggle to sleep. But again, I really appreciate anybody who has a non-consensus idea here because of the following. And this is something I wanted to say because you can easily be confusing. You can hear this and be like, Daniel, why are you talking about this? Don't you think it's important to sleep? Well, here's the thing. I think I want to help everyone on the planet who struggles with sleep. But a lot of the struggle comes from the pressure to sleep, thinking we have to sleep more. We got to get more sleep. It's so important. That's why we don't sleep. So when we hear ideas like many of Alex's ideas, that he says that there's no evidence for that. There needs not to be this pressure. That actually leads us to sleep easier and more, So we may have more unnecessary sleep, as Alex would would put it, I think, probably jokingly in his case there too. Anyway, so that was kind of the summary. Now, let's go to point one here, where he says, comfortable modern sleep is an unnatural superstimulus sleepiness, just like hunger is normal. The second part of that is not hard to see. Sleepiness is just a cue that maybe we need sleep, maybe not. But it's normal. It's just something we experience. And then my point there is that sometimes we're sleepy. It's just a regular clue. Yeah, sometimes it really means like it's time to go to bed. Our body's telling us that. Sometimes we're just sometimes we have a wave of sleepiness around lunchtime. It doesn't mean necessarily that we should or have to sleep. It's just our body's saying that we maybe could sleep at that time, something like that. Just like hunger. Every time we're hungry, it doesn't mean we have to eat, right? So that's kind of one point he's making. Then I thought this was, sort of his reply to part of his reply to the idea that 7 to 9 hours of sleep is natural, because a lot of the sleep experts out there will say, that the reason we should sleep 7 to 9 hours is that is natural. That's the natural state of things. So obviously, if that's natural, that's the way it should be, etc. That's kind of the consensus belief. Now, this is one way Alexey challenges this. He says, think about sleep 10,000 years ago. You sleep in a cave, in a hut, under the sky, with predators and enemy tribes roaming around. You're on a wooden floor or on an animal's skin or on the ground. The temperature will probably drop to -5, 10 degrees Fahrenheit, or actually Celsius overnight, meaning that if you were comfortable when you were falling asleep, you're going to be freezing when you wake up. Finally, there's moon shining right at you, all kinds of sounds coming from the forest around you. In contrast to today, you sleep on your super comfortable machine-crafted foam of the exact right firmness. You are completely safe in your home, protected by thick walls and doors. Your room temperature stays roughly constant, ensuring that you stay warm and comfy throughout the night. Finally, you're in a light and sound insulated environment of your house. If there's any kind of disruptive noise or things, you can have an eye mask or earplugs. And then he says, does this sound natural? And I was laughing. I said, does this sound natural? And when you put it in this context, it's like, it doesn't sound very quote unquote natural, but anyway, what is natural? But you can definitely see that if somebody says, well, it's natural to sleep 7 to 9 hours, that's how we slept many years ago in the past, maybe not. I don't know what is natural, the way we slept in the past or the way we sleep now. It really questions the word natural, right? And then since this is heard online, we should take a look at all aspects of a paper, I think. And then he says, now, what if the only sleep available to you was modern sleep? And he says, if you don't sleep at all, you go crazy, which is, to me, is like the one of those, oh my gosh, Alexey. Like, on one hand, I love Alexey because, he is very methodical, analytical, and he often builds up a really strong case for something, a framework, and he's very critical of somebody kind of making a statement without any basis for that. And then I'm like, but Alex, this also, I don't know that there is any evidence for that at all. I have not found any evidence for like little sleep making you crazy. So that kind of like, that was a little triggering for me there. But anyway, I've invited Alexey to come on the channel again and talk more about his work. So maybe we can ask him about that at that time. Okay, point number two. Alex has said, he talks about a kind of bidirectional relationship between depression, oversleeping, and mania and acute sleep deprivation. And I'm not going to go into this, but I'm just going to share my thoughts here, which is that insomnia comes from a state of like hyperarousal. When we think there's a threat or something is exciting us, we're in this hypervigilant state in which we don't sleep as much, because the idea is that something is about to happen. We need to be alert, so we sleep less. But I believe that we, on the flip side, can be sort of like in this hypo aroused state as well. When we are, imagine if we are facing these overwhelming odds for some reason, we think that, there's just no way I can do anything, and we feel, and sort of the way that the way that our brains respond to that to keep us the most safe is to deploy sadness, because sadness makes us go like, there's nothing to do, I should do nothing. And in a way, like when the odds are overwhelming, the safest thing is probably to do nothing. And then we become like hypo aroused, the opposite of hyper aroused. We become hypo aroused, and then we sleep often very much. And so this, it's, we know at least anecdotally, but I think this is true, that when we are depressed, we tend to sleep more. When we feel sad, we tend to sleep more. So I think there is this kind of relationship between our state of arousal and how much we sleep. But I don't think, well, I'll just put it this way, that I think when Alex say this, what he describes here is more his ideas are more like depression is this kind of more clearly defined clinical entity, and mania too. To me, um, I don't think so much in those terms. I think, and again, nothing here is medical advice, just me sharing my thoughts. I think sleeping has to do with our state of arousal, and I don't think it's more complicated than that. That's how I look at number two here. Number three, occasional acute sleep deprivation is good for health, and yeah, I'm smiling here because he says here, I combed through a lot of sleep literature and I haven't seen a single study that made a parallel to either fasting or exercise, and I haven't seen a single pre-registered randomized controlled trial that tried to see what happens to someone if you subject them to 1 to 3 nights per week of acute sleep deprivation. So basically saying that there is no evidence that occasional sleep deprivation is good for health or negative for health. So I don't necessarily agree with the title here, but I would definitely agree with this saying that there's no evidence that acute sleep deprivation is harmful to your health. I would definitely agree to that. Now, here this was really interesting. Number 4, our priors about sleep research should be weak. Do you believe in power posing or ego depletion, hungry judges, and brain training? If the answer is no, then your priors for our knowledge about sleep should be weak, because quote unquote sleep science is mostly just rebranded cognitive psychology, with the vast majority being small, not pre-registered p-hacked experiments. Now, I had to look up what does a pre-registered study mean? What is that? What type of experiment is that? Well, a pre-registered study is when you, before you start collecting any data, you publish or register your ideas, your hypothesis, why you do the experiment. And why is this so important? Well, it is because most studies in the sleep world are not done that way. Rather, someone has some hypothesis, true, then they collect all the data, but then they write their paper, and when they write their paper, they already have the results available, so they can kind of tweak it and say like, oh, this is what we wanted to show, and we showed that, and of course it's aligned with what we think, etc. So you can maintain the consensus belief, but not if we pre-register. And so Alex says that I have been able to find exactly one pre-registered experiment of the impact of prolonged sleep deprivation on cognition. It was published by economists from Harvard and MIT in 2021, and its pre-registered analysis found null or negative effects on sleep on all primary outcomes. Note that both the abstract and the main body of the paper reports the results without the multiple hypothesis correction, in contradiction to the pre-registered plan of the study. The paper does not mention this change anywhere. I'm not sure exactly what that meant, but what this study showed was that, basically what they did was that they looked at like 450 people, and they used actigraphy and checked how much they slept, and sort of encouraged people to, spend more time in bed, and sleep more, whatnot. And they saw an increase in measured sleep. I don't know if they slept more or not, because again, I don't think you can produce sleep, but maybe they were a little bit sleep deprived. Maybe they did sleep a little bit more, who knows? But they saw no impact on like work performance or happiness or interpersonal, like they didn't show any impact, which doesn't sound earth shaking perhaps when you hear me say this, but if you think about it, yeah, I think it is. Because if you look at the National Sleep Foundation, policymakers and experts in the field, they all say like, if we just slept a little bit more, we would be more productive, we would be happier. And this one previous experiment shows that that's not the case at all. That's not the case. I thought that's pretty interesting. And there's one thing I wanted to read here. It's a paragraph here which says, imagine if sleep researchers had conclusively shown that sleep is not important for memory, health, etc. Would they get any funding? No. Their jobs are literally predicated on convincing the NIH and other grant makers that sleep is important. As Patrick McKenzie notes, if you want a problem solved, make it someone's project. If you want it managed, make it someone's job. I don't know who Patrick McKenzie is, but I think this is so important to know. Like when you when you hear the same thing over and over from the NIH, from the Sleep Foundation, from this and that government body, think about why. And I think this answers a lot of that. Decreasing sleep. So point number 5, decreasing sleep by 1 to 2 hours a night in the long term has no negative health effects. Yes, I think we talked about this a lot on the channel. There's no evidence to show that decreasing sleep has any negative health impact. And then I wanted to just go over 2 more things. They're actually in the appendix. And the first one, I believe, is point number 11. I have no trust in sleep scientists. Okay, Alexa says, why do I bother with all this theorizing? Why do I think I can discover something about sleep that thousands of them couldn't discover over many decades? The reason is that I have approximately 0 trust in the integrity of the field of sleep science. As you might be aware, 2 years ago, I wrote a detailed criticism of the book Why We Sleep, written by a professor of neuroscience at psychology at UC Berkeley, the world's leading sleep researcher and the most famous expert on sleep, and the founder director of the Center for Human Sleep Science at UC Berkeley, Matthew Walker. Here are just a few of the biggest issues. There were many, many more with the book. Walker wrote, routinely sleeping less than 6 or 7 hours a night demolishes your immune system, more than doubling your risk of cancer, despite there being no evidence that cancer in general and sleep are related. There are obviously no randomized controlled trials on this. And in fact, there is not even a correlation between general cancers and sleep duration. I remember reading that. I think that was actually one of the first statements. Walker falsified a graph from an academic study in the book. Walker outright fakes data to support his sleep epidemic argument that on sleep duration. Walker presents the graph below. It doesn't exist. This is super interesting. So Walker says that in this year we slept this much, then we slept this much, then we slept this much. I think it goes like year by year, supposedly. Like that's what these dots are supposed to mean. And here's like obesity trends, right? But then, Alexey presents some actual data on sleep deprivation over time. And you see this is in minutes here, and people report. I think this is all reports. This is not objective. People report sleeping from 400 minutes, 460 minutes here back in the 60s to 2010. I mean, it's all over the place. It's absolutely not like this. It's not like that at all. I don't know where that came from. Oh my goodness. All right. And then he says, did any sleep scientists voice the concerns with the book or with Walker? No. They were too busy listening to his keynote. Did any sleep scientists voice their concerns after I published my essay detailing its errors and fabrications? No. Unless you count people replying to me on Twitter as voicing concern. Did Walker lose his status in the community, his NIH grants, or any of his appointments? No, no, and no. I don't believe that a community of scientists that refuses to police fraud, and of which Walker is foremost representative, could be a community of scientists that would produce a trustworthy and dependable body of scientific work. I have nothing more to add. Nothing more to add. And number 12, and this will be the last one, the idea that sleep's purpose is metabolic clearance, if not total BS, is massively overhyped. Alexey says that, this idea that somehow during sleep we kind of clear the brain from harmful metabolic substances. It came from this 2013 paper that has gotten more than 30,000 citations, and it's highly misleading. He says, the paper found that anesthesia without sleep results in the same clearance, meaning that clearance is not caused by sleep per se, but instead only co-occurs with it. And this is kind of typical, right? Somebody finds some correlation, and then a whole thing is built upon that. But yeah, I will conclude there, and I will say that Alexey, again, I think of him as the most dangerous man in sleep, because he's willing to say things that very few in this sleep kind of community are willing to say and see. So I applaud him for that. I think there's some things I don't necessarily 100% agree with this in this essay, but again, I think Alexey is doing some very important work. Slowly but surely, kind of picking at things here, like picking at this construct, and hopefully we'll see more clarity and more truth in the sleep space as time goes by. And we'll see, maybe Alexey will be a guest on the channel. So anyway, That was Heard Online number 2. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and we'll go from there. For now, bye-bye.